Jerusalem is not for sale. That's the response from Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas following the proposal for peace in the Middle East from the United States. US President Donald Trump presented the long-awaited plan, which promises to keep Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The plan also recognises Israel's sovereignty over West Bank states. To explain further what this deal means, we're joined by foreign policy expert and Otago University Professor Robert Patman. Good morning.
Good morning, Hayley.
So Donald Trump has described this as a realistic two-state solution, but both the people who oppose and are for a two-state solution say that this is the nail in the coffin for it. What's going on?
I think it's only realistic from the Israeli and the American point of view under Mr. Trump. The Palestinians have played no part in the drawing up of the peace plan, which envisages a truncated, emasculated form of sovereignty for them. And Mr. Trump has, more than any other president, openly sided with Israel in the dispute, this long-running dispute between the Israelis and the Palestinians. For example, Mr. Trump's administration recognised Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, something which has not been widely recognised. And also, in addition, he has recognised that what under international law are illegal settlements since the 1967 war, something like more than 400,000 Israeli settlements in the West Bank. The administration have recognised those as being permanent. And in addition, both Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Trump have also indicated in the next week, Mr. Netanyahu said they'll be going ahead with extending Israeli sovereignty into about 30% of the West Bank. So from the Palestinians' point of view, this plan was dead on arrival. They played no part in its formulation, and they certainly do not like the approach of the Americans, who have, by their steps, showed they've got little concern for Palestinian self-determination.
This is legitimising, in a way, Netanyahu's plans to colonise, as you said, more of the West Bank. What could the international response to this possibly be? Well,
first of all, I don't think it's going to work. And so it's unlikely to be a breakthrough. Now, Jared Kushner, Mr. Trump's son-in-law, who's been given responsibility for drawing up this plan, of course, he's heavily committed to Israel. He basically says this is the last chance, or one of the last chances, for the Palestinians. But the Palestinians' situation is pretty dire, and from their point of view, continuing to resist this plan is better than accepting something which falls way short of their aspirations. And they do have international law on their side. The UN, for example, under Secretary General, have indicated that the two-state solution, they welcome the idea of a two-state solution, but it must be based under the 242 resolution of 1967. And also, it must not be based on annexation or the fruits of war, to quote the resolution. So, in a sense, there's a bit of a split developing between the Western Europeans and the UN and the United States. And I haven't heard too much from the New Zealand government since this plan has been floated, excuse me, but I think the New Zealand position would not recognise a two-state solution which is based on raw power rather than the rule of law and principles.
Internationally, there's been a lot of finger-wagging when Israel seems to sort of push the boundaries, literally. What can they actually do? Would there be some real consequences if Israel goes ahead with its plans to annex the West Bank?
I think at the moment it's very difficult to envisage real consequences until there is... At the moment, America is trying to be the peace broker, but it's committed to one side, which means that mediation is almost doomed to fail. So until there's a, to answer your question, Hayley, until there is a credible alternative broker or a different administration, Mr. Sanders, for example, who's running for the presidency, or he's trying to get the nomination of the Democrats at the moment, he's made it quite clear he would be much more even-handed and seek to re-establish America's credentials as an honest broker in the discussions.
If this peace plan succeeded, what would life be like for Palestinians?
Well, it's pretty grim now in both in Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and their conditions have deteriorated. America has cut humanitarian aid for the Palestinians, and also diplomatic representation by the Palestinians in Washington has been reduced under Mr. Trump. So it's very grim. And one of the tragedies of this present situation is that I think that Israel, which struggled so hard to achieve its self-determination, somehow over the years has lost empathy for those who are also seeking self-determination in the Palestinian territories. So it's a tragedy. And I think ultimately there's not going to be a secure Israel until the Palestinians achieve what they see as a just solution to their vision for self-determination. The other point to add here, Hayley, briefly, is that maybe this is not a serious plan, but because both Mr. Trump and Mr. Netanyahu have serious political and legal problems at the moment. Mr. Trump is facing impeachment for possible treason, and Mr. Netanyahu is facing legal problems with regard to possible fraud and bribery.
Wow.
And both of them face elections this year. So this plan deflects some of the domestic heat both of them are facing. It's been, in preparation for a long time, but it's been released now.
It's so cynical, isn't it? Thank you so much, Robert Patman from Otago University.
Gosh, he's good, Robert, isn't he?
Yeah.
That was such a, I think, a fair and rational explanation of what's going on. And if the settlement is unilateral, if it's being imposed on Palestine, and if it's a raw power thing, then of course there's going to be a response from the Palestinians. And so the paradox of what is going on here is that Israel is not achieving security by further. So in fact, the only thing that will work is a deal that all the parties buy into, which is the point that Robert's making.
Yeah,
and this
they
ain't
kind
it.
of said that after the 1967 war.
Yeah.
If you go back to those boundaries, then we could work on a proper
which Israel's never going to do, right? Boy, oh boy. Anyway, that's a great interview. Thank you, and thanks, Robert, for coming in.